Thank you, Jangwon. It's my honor to be invited and to be able to talk to all of you. And this is actually maybe particularly fun because the project I'm going to talk about today is one that I collaborated on with Jangwon's other advisor, David Crandall. So you get both of us in one. um, so just to give you, Jangwon, thank you for the very wonderful explanation and introduction. I'm going to tell you maybe a little bit about myself as well. Um, so I'm just so you know where my talk is coming from. I'm a social scientist. I got into robotics because I was interested in how people design robots to be social. And then from there, I got engaged in studying human robot interaction. So, studying how we can better understand people so we can design robots to be more useful or helpful or to be kind of more suitable for different contexts. So, some of the things that we do in the lab, I think just before you saw a bunch of, I don't do these things alone, I do them with my students and collaborators, many of whom you see here. But some of the things that we do is one, understanding social perceptions of robots. And I think it's echoing somewhere just a little bit. I don't know if it's possible to turn off one of the microphones, but I'm not sure which one.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
could you
okay.
please turn off one of the microphones? I also can hear that there's some echoes.
It might be, I don't know how, okay. That's okay. I'll keep going. Just I can hear myself, so it's a little weird.
Okay, sorry for that. Anyway, yeah, you can keep going. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. So one of the things that we're very interested in is understanding people's perceptions of robots. And for this, what we often do is design some robot prototypes. Like here you see some robot trash cans that people were interacting with in cafeterias. And we often do studies in the field. So we put robots out in people's everyday environments and we try to understand how people respond to them, what kind of design features change the ways that people perceive and use the robots. Another thing that we do in the lab is design and evaluate socially assistive robots. So these are robots that are supposed to help people in various ways, often in a healthcare kind of setting, but through social interaction, not so much through physical interaction. And actually, the project I'm going to talk about today relates to this part of our work. Um, and we also do some child robot interaction design. In the assistive side, we often work with older adults and adults who have kind of some mental health concerns. But we also work in educational robotics on child robot interaction, working on co-designing robots with children or figuring out how we can use robots in educational ways. And finally, like Jangwon said, we're very interested in how robots are perceived and used in different contexts, including different cultures. So we've been doing some studies of robots in Japan, and below there's actually some, I don't know if you can read it, but that's actually in Korean because that's some work that I did with Jangwon's also colleague Hiren on how people in Korea and people in the US think about robots. So we're often curious about how different social norms and cultural norms may affect how people interact with robots. But today I'm going to tell you about a project that we did in collaboration with Toyota Research Institute as part of their University 2.0 project. And this one is about robots, how people use and think about and want to use robots in the United States and Japan. And it's focusing on older adults and this term called Ikigai. I don't know if this is a familiar term for you. It's a Japanese term. No, but it's actually become more and more popular in kind of popular culture as well. There have been many pop culture books written about this. And really, what it means is it's a sense of meaning and purpose in life. And as we know, at different points in our life, different things may give us a sense of purpose and meaning, but sometimes as people age, their life circumstances may change. And the things that gave them a sense of meaning may also need to change. And sometimes that might be hard to maintain. So what we became interested in this project is kind of figuring out how we can actually maybe use a conversational robot to help people think about, reflect on, and try to maintain their sense of purpose in life. So in terms of Ikigai, just to give you some background on the idea, I actually first learned about it from my mom, because she was reading this very popular book about Ikigai, the Japanese secret to a long and happy life. Clearly more like pop culture literature. But Ikigai is also a term that is very important for Toyota Research. One of their missions is to actually help people kind of achieve their sense of purpose through interactions with technology. And in Japan, the government even has policies about ensuring that older adults have kind of a continued sense of Ikigai. So it's something that the government works on, but also has kind of municipal and different kinds of activities, continuing education, older adult communities kind of try to work on this theme together. So what we tried to work on in this Toyota Research IU Bloomington project is developing a conversational robot that can help older adults achieve and maintain their sense of meaning and purpose in life. And the idea of how to do this was that we would kind of use conversations with the robot to create user models that could change over time. And then the robot would be able to perform some kind of interactive intervention through the conversation to help people reflect on their Ikigai, and to help them kind of think about ways that they could actually improve it, if they were, feeling that they needed that. So the project went over about 4 years, and we ended up working with about 1,000 participants in the two countries. So we worked with older adults in the United States and in Japan, and we did a lot of different kinds of research, surveys, interviews, co-design, so working together with users, which I'm going to tell you about. And finally, we were able to do user evaluations in user homes and in elder care facilities. And so I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit about this in more detail. Normally, I would ask you if you have questions at this point, but it's probably hard to do online. So if you do have questions, you can type them in or something, and Jingwon can stop me. So one of the first things that we wanted to do relating to Ikigai was to actually understand a little bit about how older adults understand it themselves. And for this, we ended up doing a bunch of expert interviews. So talking to people who kind of do something related to Ikigai as part of their everyday life. And this includes older adults who in Japan actually help other older adults maintain their Ikigai, either as community leaders or sometimes as people who are kind of teaching in a senior citizens college. And then we also talked to some researchers who worked on Ikigai, and we wanted to kind of understand what are the components of Ikigai. And so the thing that they explained to us was that there are actually kind of 3 components typically that people see as kind of bringing their life meaning. One has to do with the first person, so it's things you can do to improve yourself. One has to do with kind of second person, so it's relationships with other people, like your family or friends. And then the third has to do with kind of giving back to the community, doing something useful for society. And that's kind of a third person Ikigai. So this gave us an idea of the different kinds of areas that our robot could maybe lead conversations about or try to intervene in to help older adults. We also showed these people the robot, and they gave us some kind of suggestions for what it could do, supporting singing or connecting to family. And that was kind of the initial part of work we did to design the robot. We also started talking to older adults about what their feelings of Ikigai, where they came from. And for this, we did surveys and interviews with older adults in the United States and Japan. And some of the things that they said actually matched the things that the experts had been telling us. So they mentioned these three different sources: the personal development, friends and family or relationships, and then giving back to the community. But what was most interesting to us here was that people who lived at home by themselves and then people who lived with others had slightly different uh, kind of sources of Ikigai that they mostly talked about. So people who lived by themselves focused more on hobbies, learning, kind of developing their own independence. And older adults who lived with others really focused on those relationships. So this also suggested to us that when we're kind of working with older adults in different contexts, we need to have kind of conversations that are very adaptive. We also showed them the robot and let them talk to it in an initial kind of Wizard of Oz setting. So it was controlled by people, and they found it comfortable to talk to. They said they were fine talking about their memories, about their past, their future. But one of the things that they were concerned about was what to do if they were discussing negative events or memories. And this kind of comes back later when they actually start when we start doing studies and people are really talking about their memories with the robot. So at around that time, we started collaborating with a local memory care facility. Our aim throughout the whole project has been to design the robot for older adults more generally. But we also wanted to look at kind of more specific cases. And in this case, this is older adults with dementia. I don't know if you're familiar with dementia. It's a progressive kind of condition of aging where people may have different cognitive effects, including memory loss, sometimes loss of speech. And so people are often taken care of in the home in the beginning, but sometimes after a while, when their family may maybe not be able to take care of them, they go into a facility. And so the place that we worked with was a residential facility for older adults with dementia. And the director there was very interested in trying to figure out how to use technology to help people kind of keep growing and keep experiencing life to the fullest. And so she worked with us for from the first year of the project to kind of help us both better understand dementia, but then also think through how we could really use the robot in interactions with older adults in her community. And so the two kinds of things, we ended up doing a lot of co-design with older adults there. So working with them from the very beginning of the project to figure out what the robot should do and how it should behave and what activities it should do. And so we had a lot of what I would call mutual learning between the community and the group of researchers. And we really tried over time to figure out how we could use the robot, but also the research itself to kind of foster a feeling of well-being for the older adults there. And I think one of the outcomes of the research really had to do with this, how kind of being part of the research itself became a sense of a source of Ikigai, or a source of a sense of purpose for the older adults in the facility. So in terms of working with older adults with dementia, one of the challenges is that different people have different have different levels of dementia. So one size of method maybe doesn't fit all. And also typical kind of co-design methods maybe don't work with this population because they might be very confusing, which is what we found out. We found out that people sometimes sometimes people would kind of in the middle of the activity forget what exactly they were doing or what question they were supposed to be answering. So one of the first things we ended up doing was trying to figure out how to do design with people who are experiencing cognitive decline. And in order to do this, we worked with the director of the facility to kind of refocus our design activities on the notion of well-being. So thinking first of how can we make the older adults who are participating really feel fulfilled through the activity and comfortable and kind of confident that they can participate. And then how can we kind of understand something about the robot itself. So I'm going to kind of show you a little video that's a collection of different activities that we did with older adults in this facility to kind of make them comfortable with co-design and then to kind of design the robot together.
Well, I think it's all working together, but I do think we need practice in ours being on the note that we need to be on.
Yes. Yeah, Melba's grandsons gave it to Melba yesterday.
One of my grandkids.
Put it on the sign. Dave.
There you go.
Aww.
Oh, I don't know if it'll stick or not.
As well as they were shown, they can be lifted up a notch.
I think so too.
Good, you agree with that?
Because we're human, but we also see the limits on that. And some people want to say those limits allow the most inhuman things to happen. And they also...
Up to the ball game.
So the idea of this being that there are these kind of things that through the design methods we try to achieve. So we try to kind of bring them there with people like a friend, somebody that they're comfortable with, give them opportunities to do things that they kind of like to do and are comfortable doing, singing songs that they know with the robot, but also making sure that they have plenty of time to express themselves and kind of give us their thoughts about what the robot should do. And that really helped us figure out kind of what they were comfortable with doing with the robot, such as, you know, the singing and some conversations. And it also allowed us a way to be in the space with the robot and start thinking about what kind of activities we could design. And so from being in that space, we actually designed our first activity that the robot did with older adults, which was a conversation activity based in kind of storytelling and remembrance. So this was based on something that we saw the older adults doing with participants in the nursing home, or we saw the clinicians or the staff doing with the older adults, which was they would bring them together and do kind of a storytelling activity based on pictures. And this was meant to both get them to be creative, but also sometimes to reminisce. And the staff actually suggested, well, maybe this is something that the robot should do. So the first activity that we developed was this kind of storytelling activity for older adults, led by the robot, particularly meant for times when staff maybe weren't available to lead the activity themselves. So you'll get some a little video here of the robot.
I am Cutie, your robot friend. I am glad you are here. Welcome to today's story-making activity. Let us make up a story about this picture.
You can just make up something?
Well, I think right now he's playing in the water in the lake where he lives.
Tell me more about it.
I can remember being at Yellowwood State Forest in Brown County, Indiana, on a lovely afternoon a couple of years ago.
I think it turned out to be wonderful.
Oh, I do too.
Have a happy rest of the day.
Oh, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, this is a wonderful robot. I love this.
So one thing we realized through this is that older adults really enjoyed having these kinds of conversations, but it also gave us a way to collect information about things about their past, about things they enjoy, about people that they want to talk about in terms of kind of developing this user model of Ikigai. And when we talked to older adults later, they said that they were kind of happy to have these revived memories that they shared with the robot and that they themselves could then reflect on afterwards. So following this kind of initial development, we started a broader project, which was a kind of long-term panel with a larger group of older adults who started coming to our lab. This was about 12 older adults, and it included people who have dementia and their caregivers, and then it also included just older adults who don't have any cognitive impairment, who live by themselves or live with their family. And they came to the lab every few weeks to basically help us iteratively design the robot. So we knew that we wanted the robot to have conversations with older adults. We knew we had this photo activity that we wanted to develop. But we didn't know kind of the details of how exactly the robot should behave, what it should ask, what kind of facial expressions it could give, what kind of problems might happen in the conversations, or how to address issues that might come up, like people feeling, expressing something that makes them sad. And so those are the kinds of things that we worked with the older adults here with. And we ended up working with them for about a year and a half. In different kind of iterative ways of developing the robot. And you can see here that if you look at the timeline below, there are kind of bursts of technical development and stuff, which is kind of the green stuff in the bottom, that gets kind of interspersed with moments when we show this off to the older adult participants and get their feedback, and then continue kind of doing technical development. And so one of the things that the older adults in this panel did was also kind of try out the robot many times in different iterations. And I'm just going to show you a couple of little early conversations that the robot had with them in the lab to give you an idea. And to preface this, we also at this point, through conversation with them, kind of changed the photo activity a little bit. Instead of showing them a random photo, now the robot, actually, you can show the photo, any photo you want to the robot. So often it could be a photo on your phone, it can be a photo of your family. Since David's a computer vision researcher, basically we can see what's in the photo, and the robot will have a conversation with the older adult about what's on this photo. So you'll see some quick examples here of what that might look like.
Could you bring the photo closer to my face?
This is my nephew and his wife and their 2 children. They are very important to us because they represent part of who we are and who I have become.
We saw within about 12 or 15 feet of us a 12-foot tall grizzly bear.
It must be cute. What did you see?
It was so cute and cuddly, we wanted to pet it.
So at around this time, we were initially designing a conversation system for the robot, but around this time, GPT came out. And then we basically integrated GPT into the robot. And part of what the older adults helped us do was figure out how to prompt it appropriately. But they also got to be some early testers of GPT and all the fun things that GPT can throw out at you, and the misunderstandings that you can get with it, which they all kind of dealt with a lot of good humor. And so over time, we ended up kind of improving and developing the system further. We kind of created a set of conversational turns with specific questions. And then we started deploying the robot in elder care facilities around town, basically, to have people talk to it, to see what kinds of things they talk about, to see if they're comfortable, and to see what kind of effect actually talking to the robot has on their feeling of sense of purpose. So I'm gonna show you another example of a later conversation that the robot has with a person, but also an example of some of the kind of not so funny problems that came up when people started sharing their experiences with.
Nice to meet you. For this activity, I'd like you to show me a picture that you treasure, and then we can talk about it. Whenever you're ready, let me know.
Here's my picture.
Can you tell me more about why and where it was taken?
Why it was taken? I don't know why. They just took pictures of everybody.
What did you find most rewarding about his work in the sciences, and how did it impact the universities he visited?
Well, we connected because I was getting my master's in microbiology, and he had gotten his PhD the year after he was hired, the day after he was hired. And a few hours later, he was dead. And that's all. And that was the end of my life, too. That's all I have to say about
What was
this
the most
picture.
special memory you have of your time together?
Okay, when you're done with this.
So one of the things that really surprised us, we tried this robot ourselves many, many times as we were testing. And even though kind of in a very typical fashion of what happens with robotics researchers, even though you know how the robot works, you still kind of respond to it in very social ways. So even with ourselves and then later with participants, we were actually quite surprised how easily people started really deeply engaging in the conversations with the robot. As you can see, you know, they tell things in great detail. They sometimes even would say that they would describe things to the robot that they wouldn't necessarily tell to a person, because they felt that the robot wasn't judgmental, and so that they could talk about anything that they wanted. But as you can see in this particular example, the robot doesn't always know how to respond to this appropriately. And throughout our studies, there was always there were always people around. You can tell that the researchers are there. There's somebody who can jump in and kind of help people address any kind of mental distress that they might be feeling. But this also made us think, if this robot is supposed to be kind of assisting older adults or even assisting caregivers in moments when they might, be a little bit on the side doing something else while the robot is talking to a person, we need to kind of figure out how to have the robot either respond more appropriately or, call another person in to help. So we started thinking a little bit about what to do with managing these bittersweet emotions that come up with a lot of reminiscence. Often older adults would, just like the case that you just saw, would talk about things that were happy, having family, having friends, being in love and those kinds of things. And then over time, that might be something that turns sad when you lose that kind of connection. And so we started thinking, how can we maybe prepare them better for this kind of thing? And we started thinking about, in terms of design, what to do. And we thought of things we can do kind of before the interaction, during the interaction, and after the interaction. And so before the interaction, one of the things that we started considering is that actually kind of either ourselves or a caregiver or the robot itself asking some questions about how people are feeling that day. Are they comfortable discussing their emotions? Do they want to talk about photographs? What kinds of thoughts or emotions might surface while they were choosing the photographs? Because we asked them to bring, photos with them. Also, even asking questions of, do you want somebody to be with you while this conversation is going on? So kind of even before the interaction starts, some maybe emotional preparation is necessary. During the interaction, we started considering what kind of additional questions the robot could ask people in order to help them kind of navigate moments when maybe they're, experiencing something that's a little bit sad. So, instead of just going on, the robot could actually talk to the person about how they're feeling as a result of losing someone. One of the things that older adults in our co-design session said is that sometimes they were annoyed when the robot actually assumed that they were sad, because sometimes they felt it was just normal to lose a friend or something like that. So they wanted kind of the robot to check in with them first about how they actually felt before it responded. And then we thought the robot could actually ask them if they want to change the topic, or they want to kind of chat with somebody else, have it call a friend or a family member. And then finally, just like we had always somebody there who could help with managing difficult emotions that came up among the research team, we thought that in the end, this kind of conversational robot maybe isn't completely appropriate to have in an isolated setting. So this should be something that's thought of as a system where the family or somebody else or other caregiver is also included and kind of learns what the older adult might have been talking to the robot about, or can be called in when there are kind of issues that come up that the robot can't deal with. So it's still something that we're considering, but in terms of having a system that's conversational in a kind of mental health situation, I just wanted to bring this up because it's always kind of a consideration of, how can we deal with these difficult moments that occur. Another kind of activity that we developed was also kind of reflection activities for older adults. So this was maybe more inspired by different kind of positive psychology kind of ideas, so that you could maybe reflect on your gratitude, or thinking about some things about yourself can lead to positive self-improvement. And so we had different ways that people could talk to the robot about their goals, their things that they had achieved, and I'll show you some conversations from there.
I'm I.R.I.S, and I'm here to help you with today's activity. Let's talk about accomplishments. What is something that you have achieved in your life that you are proud of?
Oh, well, I worked 50 years as an electrical engineer, and I'm pretty proud of some of the jobs that I worked on.
Tell me about something you've been doing recently that made you happy.
I have been communicating with my friends more, and also just communicate more with family.
Have you spoken to anyone in the past week that seemed particularly meaningful?
I helped with the Hanukkah bazaar, and I go to temple and have a good time there. But at temple I know more people because I've been there for 50 years.
Do you have any plans for today and tomorrow?
Planning for church, I plan for Sunday. So next Sunday, I plan to go to church. I will go with my friend in her car.
What is the one small thing you can do tomorrow to make progress towards these monthly goals?
Well, just being available, be supportive of them, and understand that the challenges that they're dealing with.
How do you think you are going to celebrate after achieving this goal and the steps you are taking towards it?
Hopefully I'll have some smiles.
So we talked to people after these activities. We did them in the United States, and we also did them in Japan. And we were kind of curious whether this was meaningful to them in any way. And in some sense, we were surprised by the level of response that we got. So one thing that people talked about was that they felt very listened to by the robot. Actually, in Japan, one older adult mentioned that sometimes people, when you talk to them, don't listen to you. But they felt that the robot was really kind of answering in contextually appropriate ways and seemed to understand what they were telling it, that it was a very good listener. Other people said that it was really helpful to them to think about themselves, that the questions the robot asked them were things that they didn't really maybe think about. And that having this kind of reflection-based conversation made them actually think about these things more for themselves. And particularly in terms of meaning of life, they thought that it made them kind of think in different ways about themselves. Like the last person down here says, I was just stuck in the daily routine and it gave me time to, consider myself, think about myself in different ways. So even though in some sense I would say the conversation was relatively simple in the way that it was structured, I think people brought into it a lot of this complexity. And to me, it's almost the robot is a kind of mirror. So it gives you an opportunity to just, even though it's a conversational partner, I think in every case, people were very aware that it wasn't a human partner. And that it wasn't some kind of human-like agent, that it was something different. And so it allowed them to kind of go through this exercise in a very self-reflective way. We ended up being able to also do evaluations of the robot in the end of the project for several weeks in a few different contexts. So these were both in the United States and Japan. GPT also was very useful in helping us immediately translate everything that the robot was saying into Japanese. We didn't have to do it ourselves. So we ended up deploying the robot in elder care facilities in the US and Japan. We also put it in Jill's house, and then we had it in the homes of 5 older adults in the United States. And we let them use it with all the different activities at least once daily for 2 weeks at a time. And then we kind of measured certain things about whether there were any changes in their feelings of meaning in life, which we didn't really expect to have changes because it's such a short time. But we were also really more interested in what kinds of conversations they had with the robot and what they would do with it when they just had it in their environment. So one of the interesting things that we found was that actually people in Japan and the US ended up talking about slightly different things when they had the robot with them over this longer period of time. Japanese older adults talked a lot about their health, and particularly about their health as a way to kind of, as a preliminary step before they could actually have a meaningful life. In some sense, if you're not healthy, you can't do anything and you're a burden to society. So that was kind of a priority for them. And in the US, the older adults often talked about their relationships with their family and what they could do for them. In Japan, people found it a little bit harder to have these immediate, deep conversations. I think there's kind of some more social norms around how to talk to each other. Sometimes they found the robot to be too polite. And in the US, it seemed people had a easier time opening up more quickly, but they also kind of shared more of these bittersweet emotions. And in Japan, people were a lot more critical of the robot. They had more ideas about what they wanted it to do with gestures. And in the US, they seemed to focus on the robot's nice smile, and they kind of had less ideas of what they wanted the robot to do differently. Another kind of difference that was really interesting to us was how people interacted with the robot when they had it in their home, which was one, of course, they had a lot more flexibility. So in these institutional environments, people would often get brought to the robot by caregivers. In the home, they could use it many, many times. And some of the older adults ended up doing a lot of chat with the robot. So not just the photo activity and reflection, but just chatting with the robot in lots of different ways. And they actually would share the robot with friends and family. One of the older adults they volunteer at a children's kind of after school daycare, and they actually brought all the kids over to their house so they could see the robot. So the robot became kind of a way for them to connect more with their community as well. And at the end of the project, in some way, I think people were surprisingly connected with the robot. So here you can see just a few examples of at the end of when we were kind of taking the robot home, so to speak, or to the lab, some of the ways that people said goodbye.
Who are you planning to connect with this week? Friends or family? Any interactions you are looking forward to?
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to having more conversation with you. I like talking with you. You listen very carefully, and it's good to talk to you. So I hope that we have more conversations this week.
Will you be my friend, I.R.I.S?
I had a very good conversation with you, I.R.I.S. Thank you very much by talking with me, to me and with me. We all had a good time listening to you.
I just think you're cute.
Thank you for the compliment, D. I'm here to make our interactions enjoyable and meaningful.
So it kind of gives you an idea of I.R.I.S became kind of a member of the community. And when we finished the project, several of the older adults kind of asked for it to not end. They wanted to know when the next version of the robot was coming. So we're still working on it. We have some other things going on now, but the students in the lab continue to take I.R.I.S to the elder care facility. I.R.I.S goes there, and we're not doing the conversational research, even though I.R.I.S sometimes goes to chat with people, but I.R.I.S also goes to dance and to bake pies. I.R.I.S doesn't bake the pies. I.R.I.S just talks to people while they're baking the pie. And to do all kinds of other activities. But in some sense, I think one of the things that was the result of the project was that both this notion of having a robot in as part of the elder care facility, but also kind of a very strong connection between students, our researchers and students in the lab, and the older adults in the nursing home really kind of, it became a very strong connection. So as a social scientist, I think it's the human questions that are to some degree most interesting for me. But of course, we had to deal with a bunch of technical things as well. So I can just tell you a little bit about them. And these actually continue. So one of the big technical problems that we had in the project was being able to tell when the person stopped talking. So as a conversational system, turn taking is a big deal. And for humans seems like nothing because we do it so naturally. But for robots, it's still actually very hard. And I don't know if you noticed in the videos, but we kind of just hacked it because the robot was basically interrupting people too much, and it was very distracting for older adults with dementia. So in the tests with the robot itself, we basically gave people a button they could press when they were speaking, so it knew when they talked. But we're actually, one of the things that we're doing still now with a lot of because we collected a lot of video, audio, kind of multimodal data from the interactions, is figuring out how we can best identify who is speaking when, and when it's the robot's turn to speak. So this is kind of an ongoing question in human-robot interaction in general. We also did a lot of work kind of with integrating GPT into these conversations in kind of ethically appropriate ways and culturally appropriate ways, and particularly trying out I.R.I.S in Japan gave us an idea of just how much conversational nuance needs to be part of these systems that maybe just having it used in the United States wouldn't have brought. So as I mentioned before, Japanese older adults commented a lot on, when the robot didn't use the right level of politeness, or when it wouldn't, for example, change the level of politeness over time as they became more familiar and closer. And so kind of besides just translating the words, I think there's still a lot more work to do on this kind of figuring out how to make the conversations culturally appropriate. And maybe not just in terms of language, but also in terms of conversational approach. Because as I mentioned, in Japan, older adults also felt that the robot asked too personal questions too quickly. Which, maybe sometimes might be a thing that people might say of Americans who go to various places is that they get too friendly too quickly, or something like that. So aside from language, just even kind of the way of talking is something that we need to think about when we're designing for different cultures. We had a very interdisciplinary team. We had social science students, design students, computer scientists. We had clinicians or kind of caregivers who wanted to do so. We had older adults who wanted to change things. And we, as I mentioned, we were working in co-design. So we often had older adults there with us, and then they would want to change something in the robot. And so you couldn't be like, sit there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or half an hour while I reprogram this. We had to come up with some easy ways to adapt the robot. So David and some of his students actually created what we called an I.R.I.S engine, which was kind of a simple Google Sheet interface that we could use to kind of call up ROS and other kinds of GPT and other things that we had as part of the interaction, so we could change it quickly and co-design quickly together. And then one of the things we're still doing is kind of figuring out how to use the materials that people told us in the conversations to kind of develop these user profiles. At the end of the studies, we actually showed people who used I.R.I.S in their home. We showed them the user profile that the robot created of them, and asked them whether it was like, whether they thought it was representative, whether the robot had missed something, whether they were comfortable with robots collecting this kind of information, creating these kinds of profiles. And it actually turned out that it seemed like I.R.I.S, we were able to collect some kind of pretty relevant information and kind of then give relevant suggestions to people about what they could do, what kind of events they could attend, who in their family they might want to call, who they hadn't called for a while, and those kinds of things based on these user profiles. And then finally, because Toyota Research asked us to do this, we also ended up collecting a data set of interactions with robots and people talking about Ikigai related conversations. And we're now doing some analyses of this data set to see if we can identify moments when people are actually really talking about something that they care about from multimodal data. And so just kind of coming to some of the things that we think are interesting takeaways. So I think through several of the years of designing this, one thing we figured out is that, older adults can be amazing collaborators in putting together different kinds of robot designs. Even older adults who in the beginning might not know anything about robots. I think over time with the co-design process, they learn a lot of things, but we also learn a lot of things together. So putting in the time is really important to create that kind of mutually beneficial relationship. We also found that this kind of Ikigai conversation can be quite meaningful to older adults and their caregivers. But that there's a lot more kind of nuance that we need to work on to make it really kind of ethically safe for people to use in a, without our constant presence there in some sense. And so I think in terms of thinking about why would we want to have these kind of robots for well-being, which is a question that I get often from people. One of the things that many of our participants said, particularly the care partners of the older adults with dementia, was that they could see this as a kind of supplement to their care, something that could help relieve their burden. Having a robot that could have some take over repetitive conversations that they may be having with their older adults, or just keep them engaged for a period of time while they have to do something else seemed very useful for them. But then we have to kind of think about some of these concerns that we might have that could be about the limits of the robot and making sure that they're clear to all of the users, and also making sure that the robot doesn't ask for too much labor from the caregivers or older adults to kind of keep it, functioning appropriately. And then I just want to say that in some sense, we all kind of found our Ikigai, funnily enough, in the project. So these are just some quotes from different people who participated. One of our researchers ended up being one of our community research partners. So somebody, one of the older adults in the community who came in and helped us with the research, kind of mentioned that, you know, although they're at the end of their career, this was kind of an amazing opportunity to bring their knowledge into a new field. Students, I think, grew in a very different way because they could connect with, you know, not just technology and not just some intellectual skills, but actually with real people, and could see a difference in terms of what these people were experiencing based on the work that they were doing. And then in terms of participants, I mean, many of them, you already saw them kind of talk about how they enjoyed the robot. But we also sometimes talked to participants' families, and because our participants are older, you know, sometimes some of them passed away during the research, and some of their families talked to us about how they really enjoyed kind of this engagement with, you know, with research, with the robot lab, with kind of giving back something to the community. So I think something that's interesting to think about in terms of research is also what kind of experience or what kind of meaning it provides to the different people who participate in it. And we got to take I.R.I.S all around the world, to Japan, Geneva. Wired wrote about it. It was a lot of fun. So I just want to say thank you. This was like done by a big team of people. And we also collaborated with the University of Tsukuba, as well as Toyota Research researchers, and our older adult participants. So I just want to say thank you to all of them. And I would be happy to take questions if you have any.